Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Blowback Roundtable. I am very honored, as usual, to have some great guests. I am Billy Bob. I'm on the West Coast. We have John Steppling from Norway, Ben Toth from Hungary, Ian Kummer from Moscow, and Carlo Parcelli from DC. And we wanted to get right into current events. And I want to hear from the panel about what topic is the most pressing current event we want to discuss.
Maybe the propaganda that pretty much prepares, the people of the world for what's next in the Middle East. Maybe that's where we should begin, because last week we were flooded with it. And you remember, it's almost 1 week. Last Saturday is when the Al-Aqsa flood or Al-Aqsa storm, the operation of Hamas against Israel began. And all the news was of that one day. It was about the festival goers. I think Alexander Mercuris called them revelers, but basically the rave goers. The 40 first settlers and them babies first killed and then beheaded. That sort of like a horrible rape atrocities. And pretty much, I think Ian can take over because AI also factors into this, but they've all been debunked, but it doesn't matter. They went out, they pulled the emotional heartstrings of everyone, and the debunk gets 1 million views, while the main story, the big headline that gets you the crocodile tears, they got 10 million. Incidentally, I'm going to hand it off to Ian or whoever wants to, but I'm going to share something. The people in London woke up to the London Times, and this here is the cover for the issue. And that is Israel shows mutilated babies. And those, as you can see, the small text, are Palestinian children at a hospital. Yeah. That's how blatant and stupid the what do you call it? Atrocity porn has been. Yeah.
So there's a couple things to, so not to steal the center stage for too long from everybody, because we have a great panel here, but I would start off with some comparisons with what happened in Donbass. So with Donbass, you had 8 years of prep time. And so they had a lot of propaganda already in the magazine, ready to, they were just ready to pull the trigger on it. So that propaganda, which was much more premeditated and better thought out, which is what leads me to think that the Hamas attack was a surprise. They weren't expecting anything like this. And that's why I'm convinced this atrocity porn looks really half-assed. It looks half-assed, because it was not premeditated, like with Donbass. But I would say there is another pattern here, which is, if you remember in those first couple months of the special military operation, they would just take photos of Russian children or Russian influencers or whoever, and say, oh, this is a Ukrainian person. These are Ukrainian children.
There was an exploded petrol station in Georgia about 5 years before, and that was one of the cover stories.
Yes. They'll just take, unrelated photos. Though I'll also add, when you see these kind of atrocity stories, you should immediately doubt them, because they're almost always turn out to be false, which is the truth here. Because even with very extreme fundamentalist group, you have to remember these are thinking human beings, and they also have common sense. So if you are trying to get the world, the international community, to sympathize with your cause, you're not going to deliberately go out of your way to commit, horrific acts. I mean, it's one thing to have these soldiers out, in the heat of the moments, they kill civilians or they kill someone they didn't intend to. I mean, that's one thing. But these very deliberate, calculated acts of brutality, like beheading babies, going through and murdering a whole line of babies, I mean, that's just so unlikely, even for the most extreme. I mean, there are, of course, historical cases of things like that happening. They're just extremely rare, especially when they make the accusation and don't have any evidence for it.
Yeah.
It's like,
right. Well,
where's the evidence?
I just want to add that,
John,
I mean, this is also, these are the marketing firms that are hired. The U.S. State Department has a record, Hill and Knowlton and all the others. Everything that goes back, I mean, from the destruction of the former Yugoslavia, where you heard about the rape camps and Fitrik Elich behind the barbed wire fence he wasn't really behind, to babies torn from incubators, to Bana Alibed, to white helmets, I mean, all of these stories, I could go on. and
Oh,
we all know that, and they're all lurid, they're all absurd, they've all been admitted to be fake, and yet they trot them out again. Like, yeah, 14 babies were beheaded. Where were these 14 babies? What, they were in a row somewhere waiting for behead? I mean, it's just, but this stuff, it doesn't have to stick very long. You know, it doesn't have to have any traction. It still serves its purpose. And the Western media, being what it is, they immediately glom onto it, and it becomes the headlines, as we just saw. Accuracy matters less than it has ever mattered before, and so this is just what the empire does. I mean, this is these kind of attacks, and I agree that I think it was a legitimate attack. It's not a false flag. That's the other thing, and then I'm going to shut up for a minute.
No, please don't.
These are Orientalist readings of events. The Arab agency is always removed, right? Even failures become something that are actually successes from the mind of the West. Israel is so devious. They're playing on this three-dimensional chessboard, and they actually, plan this whole thing because Arabs couldn't do it. They're savages. They're human animals, as the
that was the defense minister
the other day. It's just, I mean, Edward Said clocked this 40, 50 years ago. The Arab is erased. He becomes a stereotype, a signifier for something, and he has no role in his own history somehow. It's always a Western perspective, and it's always the mind of the West that makes decisions and calculations. Some are good, some are bad, but it's never the Muslim, it's never the Arab. And that's what you see with this. Hamas are savages, and that's that. And the fact that they just circumvented the most expensive surveillance system in the world, from the most heavily surveilled, chunk of earth. It somehow was foiled by a bunch of savages, and that's what we're saying. But that was the Osama bin Laden thing too. He was always an evil mastermind, but simultaneously a cave-dwelling primitive, right? There was always this kind of cognitive dissonance, and that's kind of what you're seeing here, I think.
And originally an ally of the United States.
I was going to say that.
And what if the Palestinians are animals, or Hamas are animals? What does that make Madeleine Albright, who openly admitted that she was complicit in the death of 500,000 Iraqi children?
It was worth
because
it
of the sanctions. But I find another aspect I find interesting about this is how much the story that Netanyahu was actually working with Hamas. Just and the spin when you hear it in the West is to sort of keep them calm, keep them satisfied, and it backfired. I would like to hear more comment on that from anybody here, because I don't think that's what's behind.
Well, I prepared a lot for the Scott Ritter interview, but as you said, you can't speak next to Scott. But yeah, I remember as a kid, it was who was that? Yasser Arafat, that was the Palestine Liberation Organization, signing the Oslo Accords on the White House lawn with Bill Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin, I think it was, right? Yeah. And that was the PLO, the sort of worldly, sort of socialist, no longer Soviet, but sort of socialist thing. 2 years later, he was executed, assassinated. That's Yitzhak Rabin, these guys, 2019 is the latest headline I found from Haaretz, and that was Netanyahu, this guy, urging his party, which is the Likud party in Knesset, to fund, get the funding to fucking, Hamas. Because that was their little cultivated thing against the PLO. That's who they wanted. Raise a radical, and we can use them to our own ends. And it didn't work. It didn't work with the freedom fighters, in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was once our big buddy. And then 9/11 happened. It didn't work here. And I really love that Maria Zakharova made this comment. And I'm just going to not paraphrase it, but quote it directly. We are returning to the theory of control chaos. which is the core of US policy. The problem is that chaos can no longer be controlled. And I think that has a lot to do with this. This Hamas weapon originated, within the US and Israeli funding, and it just can no longer be controlled. Now it's bitten them, is my context on that.
I would say...
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I would say it's what we're experiencing now, this whole shock and awe campaign Israel is doing. I mean, it's a weapon, but it's also a bluff, because I kind of speculated on this in our last interview with Scott Ritter, is that Scott Ritter himself said this too, if those Israeli reservists that they just plucked off the street, those 300,000 reservists, they just plucked off the street yesterday. If those barely trained soldiers go into Gaza, it's going to be a bloodbath, and they know it's going to be a bloodbath. So they're trying every trick in the playbook to essentially scrape together something they can call a victory without ground combat.
It sounds like scrambling, doesn't it? That's why the two American carriers are on the way. The US is sending ships because they want to posture instead of actually going into
they want Palestinians to just vacate that northern section of Gaza. Israelis can declare a big victory, but if Palestinians are able to get enough external support through the blockade, so there's not an unsustainable humanitarian crisis, if they're able to just stand their ground, and Israel is forced to do a ground invasion of some sort, I think it's not going to work out well. So we're trying for them.
No, ground invasion will be catastrophic.
It's Bakhmut 2.0, yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing, people seem so surprised about the failure of Israeli intelligence. I had been hearing rumors about this for 6 or 7 years, and it was attributed, one theory that had, I think, some legitimacy, was that it was the rise of the settler influence in the IDF and in Mossad, that Netanyahu had formed a coalition cynically to keep himself out of jail, really, with these very, very far-right, super extremist, far-right religious parties. And these, one thing you could always say about Israel was, okay, they're settler colonialists of some sort, and they're, vicious and ruthless, but they're not stupid. But now you can't say that anymore, because settlers are stupid. They're fanatics. They're not reasonable, rational, calculating people. And the government is now stocked with these people. And so this is what I had heard from people, take it as you will, was that there was an erosion in discipline and also this over-reliance on AI and the technology that was so easily apparently circumvented by Hamas. So.
Yeah. And also there's the psychological trap, Billy Bob, you're next, I promise, of the feeling of superiority. We are undefeatable, then no one can touch us.
Yeah.
It happened in Ukraine, it went horribly bad, and it happened here. And I kind of like that. It sounds like a threat, because Austin landed in Tel Aviv and he said, we can do it. We can support Israel exactly the same as we support Ukraine. And that's like, wow, you just ran out there. that doesn't sound good if I'm in Tel Aviv, to be honest.
No.
Billy Bob.
I did want to touch on the idea that is creeping up, and it's causing a little bit of division among the left. And it's over the idea of Hamas and if Hamas is controlled opposition. So yesterday I watched Brian Berletic, great analyst, great commentator. He provide, his contribution is always really good. But
the new Atlas channel, wonderful.
Yeah, he wanted to make a distinction between Hamas. And he pointed out how Hamas was on the side of ISIS and Al-Qaeda against Syria, and that Hamas was originally created, like we said earlier, with the help of Israel, to be a counterbalance to the PLO, because the PLO was legitimate resistance, and they preferred this Islamic-based resistance to the legitimate, secular Arab resistance.
Yeah.
So it's like this. Hamas is controlled opposition. They're doing ISIS-style atrocities, and this is all of a as part of an Israeli master plan to justify whatever Israel's going to do. So it's persuasive to an extent, and it's gaining traction. A lot of detractors but it's divisive. So these are the kind of the two ways that the left is dealing with the current events.
Well, you see the strategy there, don't you? Because what it does immediately is remove political agency from Hamas. Everywhere you read it, it's terrorist attack. That's everywhere in the West, including the EU. Right now, the flag of Palestine and even I think the British press called it Hamas-inspired clothing is banned. So far, it's Britain, Germany, and France. There's no gatherings. You can't have that flag. Thanks to places like the Cradle, I've actually seen CCTV videos of West Asia or the Middle East where people are out in the streets, in Baghdad, in Jordan, everywhere, beautiful. But the thing is, first you take away this is a political organization with a military wing. I'm no Hamas fanboy. You know, there's on the other side the Palestinian Authority, who are elected in the
West Bank.
The West Bank, exactly. And, you know, some Palestinian people say they're the jailers. Some Palestinian people say they're the regular, the UN recognized authority, you know. But still, what it does, the news does, is just take away agency from them. It's all terrorists. All those little girls, all those innocent people, it's just all terrorists. By the way, isn't it interesting that the intelligence failure didn't know where it came from, when it came from? It took months to a year to plan. But immediately the next day, they knew they were all in those bunkers, all in those tunnels, all in those buildings that they bombed. They bombed like the equivalent of 1 year in what the US did in Afghanistan. They did that in 1 week. 6,000 bombs, 3,600 targets.
Well, I think because I've heard this theory in several variations. Controlled opposition, false flag, et cetera, et cetera. On one level, my response is always, well, it doesn't matter in a certain sense, because the fact of the matter is Hamas crossed the border. I've never seen Israeli generals kind of perp walked into custody by Hamas before. Never saw that before, oddly enough. And not even Netanyahu is that cynical. But the point is, there may have well been elements of back channel deals and stuff. The settlers certainly are insane enough to, have some kind of deals with one of the. I mean, Hamas is not a monolithic organization anyway. So what we know is that this thing happened and Palestinians rose up. There was a resistance, and you could look at I went back and listened to what Nelson Mandela said about Palestine. It's very interesting. It's online somewhere. And he was pals with Arafat and so forth. But you can go to the Algerian Revolution as well, and the FLN. Like nobody liked the FLN exactly. They were ruthless and misogynistic and homophobic and puritanical, and they were all kinds of things. And they got France out of Algeria, So it's not a question of liking or disliking Hamas or what degree of legitimacy or back channel deals were made. It really doesn't matter. This is as Rashid Khalida said today, you can't lock up this many million people indefinitely and deprive them of everything. And as my friend Johan Edebo said last night, people are saying, look, they've cut off electricity and water and food to these people. And he said, yeah, but what's remarkable is that they're able to do that. What kind of situation? In which one people can just with a flip of the switch cut off the water to 2 million people?
75 years took us here.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the overriding reality, is that that's not sustainable. And it was Israeli hubris, I think, that was the ultimate, cause of this. I mean, they simply became complacent and smug on some level, however you want to tweeze apart these theories and controlled opposition ideas. To me, it doesn't matter. This was a resistance that was inevitable. This was a violence that was inevitable. How could you think it would not happen. I mean, of course, it's going to happen. And each time, I mean, it has become the last two administrations in Tel Aviv have been the worst in history and the most unbearable, visited the most humiliation and cruelty on the Palestinians, where you had children being crippled, more amputees than ever in the hospitals. And now in the last 2 days, 400 some children are dead in Gaza.
Yeah.
I mean, what universe is this? Is this
UN
acceptable?
UN coordinators, UN teachers in the schools are dead, and apparently the UN doesn't care. They're silent. The ICC is silent. It's just enraging.
Yeah.
But to your point, I watched, and I'm just paraphrasing, but that's the perfect reaction. I saw this from one, Yanis Varoufakis, who's a European Potsdam kind of guy, you know, the Greek guy. And the second one is the great Norman Finkelstein, who's kind of become desensitized. He's fought for this all his life. And he said, if you create a situation where there's a jailer and a jail, then violence is inevitable. You don't condemn the violence, you condemn the jail situation. And I full-heartedly agree, without embracing Hamas, you know?
Yeah, it's not it's not a referendum on Hamas. You know, stop doing that. It's a referendum on the Israeli settler colonial state that has created this monstrous situation that has now gone on far too long, and that as you say, the UN is so, you know, is just absolutely useless organization. But yeah, UN workers are killed, and there's not a peep. I mean, there's nothing. Nobody says anything. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
Ben, you had a thing here.
If you want to put it up on screen,
statements. But Ian and Carla, did you guys have any pressing things? Because sometimes it's hard to get in with a panel of 5.
Oh, I would say before you move on to the next thing, I would add one last thing to what John said as far as whether it was a false flag or a provocation or anything like that. I would say no. And the biggest proof of that is that, if nothing else, this past week has shattered the perception of invincibility, because there's just there were videos of Hamas guys just walking through unguarded camps, rows of vehicles.
It doesn't seem like
shooting soldiers in their underwear. There's nothing more humiliating that could have.
Yeah, high-ranking people got caught.
Yes.
Very high-ranking.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big humiliation. And the Merkava tanks, the undefeatable ones, they've burned quite a bit. We'll move on to. I wanted to ask you all about the Iran connection, because there's been some recent news on this. But this, I think, shows the absolute hypocrisy. Ursula von der Leyen, the Wicked Witch of the EU, that was exactly 1 year ago. Okay.
You want to read it, Ben? So
if you remove Russia from it, then she says anyone who attacks civilian infrastructure, especially electricity, are war crimes. Cutting off men, women, children of water, electricity, and heating with winter coming, these are acts of pure terror. Legally, Ursula, that is a crime against humanity. And that is exactly what was announced by the defense minister of Israel. And there's Zelensky back in January about the grain deal, but it was exactly the same thing, that, you know, anyone who tries to deprive people of food, water is an enemy to humanity. So they don't care. We have the receipts, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah. But what I wanted to ask you guys, because first couple of days we've all seen that insane idiot. I'll also put something else on screen just to have a little laugh. This idiot, this is satire, not a real CNN screenshot, but this idiot went on screen. He said, we need to bomb Iran's gas and oil infrastructure. That's not a real headline, but I thought it fits perfectly.
I was gonna say, is that real? Okay.
No, it's Babylon B.
It's almost something he would say. It's almost
it's very close.
He did say we should bomb Iran. However.
Yes, he did. A lot of people went up saying, we got to go. They sent Blinken, they sent all of these people to Tel Aviv, and it was all about Iran and their proxies, which one of them apparently is Hezbollah in Lebanon, the other one is Hamas, and they're all just Iran proxies. And then the news came from the Washington Post, so sort of CIA Central, you know, with Lex Luthor, the richest man on earth. And apparently they said that intelligence sources in the US say that this attack shocked Iran. They were surprised as well. And they also mentioned something that Tel Aviv has categorically denied, is that Egypt warned them weeks ahead that something was brewing. Now, why would the intelligence sources, those unnamed officials, say that? It's like trying to pull us back. Trying to pull the US. All right, okay, we got everybody's got carried away, but let's not do this Iran thing because that could be the end of the world economy, is my thinking. But I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I saw that. It's very interesting because the other, and I'll just throw this out to you guys, but the other news story was that Saudi Arabia was killing the agreement with Israel to normalize relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia, who was about to join BRICS along with South Africa, this has to make Washington uncomfortable.
Oh yeah,
because this has pretty significant implications in terms of energy. And I mean, as Putin said the other day, Putin's becoming very funny speaker.
It's
now.
very hard to disagree with him, eh?
And he said, "What? Who are you guys? You keep scolding us, saying you better not do this. You can't. Who are you people?" And that's how I feel about Iran. They're going to, Lindsay, the U.S. can't go bomb Iran. They don't have any ammunition to send to Ukraine anymore. They're sending them old cluster bombs because they've run out of everything else. So, but be that as it may, the U.S. is in no position to launch an invasion of Iran. That's all I can say. And I think there are people at the Pentagon that know this quite well. But.
Yeah, I see the Pentagon's hands all over this, saying, "Guys, you went too far. Take back." Sorry, go. I think Billy Bob was saying something, or Ian.
Oh, I was agreeing with everyone. The panel was making great points. Ian, did you want to jump in? I mean, I can jump in, but or Carlo, anyone?
I was going to add that I think there is, and this might prove to be more evidence of it. I have this idea that there is, because there's always been this internal conflict in the U.S. government between the Pentagon and the Department of State. This goes back to the 1950s, the Who Lost China Wars, or the McCarthyist era. And for a long time, the Pentagon was always the top dog. It's got the lion's share of the budget, just the lion's share of the political credibility. But that, I think, has shifted. I mean, it's shifted in part because the State Department became almost the same thing with the CIA. Just the line where the CIA starts and the State Department ends is very unclear. And the Pentagon just does not have the political sway it used to. Because the Pentagon is manned by people who know how to fight wars. Surprise, surprise. So they tend to be more grounded in reason. They're like, guys, we can beat Iraq. We can't beat Russia. We can't beat China. But now you're getting these generals being overruled by civilians who think the world is a video game. And sure, we can beat Russia. We can beat China. We can beat Iran. We can beat everybody at the same time.
At the same time.
And so I think that's
even Milley had to go, and he once said that sorry, that's all we can expect from Ukraine. It's probably not going to be offensive, and he had to go. There's a new chief of staff. Sorry,
But yes, I would say. Well, with Milley, it's a rotating position, so I don't think that's necessarily tied to anything. But still, yes, I think the person who replaces him, I haven't really looked into his replacement, but I'm sure it's going to be someone who's more malleable to what the White House wants. So.
Me neither, but he's a black Air Force commander, so we have
of course
diversity quotas.
We know that. Yes.
Oh, that's yeah. He's
They
kind
care about
of
diversity and everything except ideology.
right.
But,
Right.
So apropos of that, because we have an election coming in the U.S. And I'd be curious to get people's thoughts about that. We have Joe Biden can't run, right? I mean,
he can't speak. He doesn't know where he
is.
is.
Hard to walk across the stage anymore. And nobody wants Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris doesn't even want Kamala Harris. So who's going to run for the Democrats? I have some ideas, but I'm curious what.
I think
I'm going to leave this to the
Gavin
Americans.
Newsom, but they need to hurry up. I don't know. They don't have anything in place. And when does this election start? Like, it's soon, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's going to be Biden, but they're going to pull one of those. Okay, well, Biden can't do it. We're going to make it his VP. So who's his VP going to be? It might be Kamala, but it's a good question, John. What does everybody else think?
I think they count on Trump beating himself again and scaring the bejesus out of the population. So they're using their propaganda machine already. Trump's made these outrageous statements about Netanyahu and by
Yeah,
extension
they
Israeli.
tied this whole thing to Trump. I saw that.
And it's ongoing that the January 6th debacle and that sort of thing. So I think they're going to count on fear of Trump. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
what it. I mean, Trump beat himself last time. He scared the hell out of people. He scared the hell out of black people. He scared the hell out of all minorities. He scared the hell out of
And the elites, by
the
the way.
LGBTQ community.
That's
The
such a big
elites don't get frightened. They're not frightened. They can control the situation. Trump is part of them. Trump is really part of the elite. I mean, a guy that shits on a golden toilet, he's part of the elite. Sorry.
Well, I think that Trump, Trump fulfilled his job description, which was scaring a lot of people and becoming this straw man everything was attributed to Trump and I mean, he's so comically incompetent and he has like a third grade vocabulary and everybody enjoys making fun of him. But the Democrat, I mean, they're going to have to, and for that matter, who's going to, putting Trump in parentheses for a moment, who's going to run for the Republicans for that matter? Nikki Haley.
Jesus, yeah, she's on campaign.
No, I think for the Democrats, I want to go on record before anybody else and say Michelle Obama is going to be the Democratic.
Okay, wow.
Okay, I was going to say
I have not heard that anywhere, so that's definitely the first place I heard it.
More funny than not is Hillary Clinton has been spotted more recently in media appearances wearing campaign hair. And the other one I suspect is Mike Pence, who has the big words now, they both have negative charisma. They have zero chance at the throne, but it's just funny, these people. And the third one, which was just, I thought satire, but I checked it. Cenk Uygur announced that he's going to save the Democrats. He announced he's running on X, Twitter, and he immediately got community notes because a naturalized US citizen born in Turkey cannot be president. Yeah. Like within hours that happened. It was beautiful.
That's too bad. Poor Cenk.
I would not rule out Antony Blinken because he is actually in line for the presidency. If for some reason the VP is not eligible or they don't pick the VP, they can go with the Secretary of State. He's in line for the presidency. So it's
I think that's
unheard of.
Yeah, I like that.
I would have said Gavin Newsom 3 months ago, but they just haven't done anything to really get him on the ballot and get him in front of people. So that's why I think it's going to be Biden again. And I don't think they're going to allow Trump to run. I think it's going to be Biden, and Biden's probably going to win because the Republicans are going to be divided. And then Biden can't last. But you know what? I said that the first time. I said there's no way Biden lasts 4 years. He's going to do 3 months, and they're going to give us Kamala, and that was 4 years ago. So I was wrong.
Anyway,
well, I think
just doing
one of that may have been the plan, right? Kamala, but she's a disaster. They can't let her talk.
Kathleen Kamala is just so stupid, like worse than Baerbock.
Visibly stupid. And this is, people read this now. She can't run. And that's the problem with Gavin Newsom, by the way, is, I mean, people in California loathe Gavin Newsom. And he just doesn't read as likable. He's a sinister figure to too many people. But I think that at one point was the intention. He was going to be America's Justin Trudeau or something. But so I don't know, and it's an interesting question because this election is not very far off, and I like the Blinken idea. That's certainly a possibility for the Republicans, man. Who knows?
I wouldn't be surprised at the Blinken take, but I'm going to add something. As the outsider, you overrule me because you all have connections to America. But let me know. I think RFK is out, and I think Cornel West is out. RFK basically, since this thing happened, he's acting like he's running for the president of Israel, which I think just pretty much ruined all his chances.
Yeah, no, the sound you heard was the death of Bobby Kennedy's presidential aspirations.
Okay, thank you. So I got that one right. But then Cornell did the fishy, I'm not going to run with this party, that party, and basically just said, fuck it. I don't know why he ran in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was never viable, but
no, he was a novelty act anyway. But yeah, I don't know, and it's going to be, but I suspect it's going to be a very strange election anyway, because you have, the other things going on. Of course, we go back to the Obama presidency, that was the giant transference of wealth to the top 1%, the pivot to Africa. Then you had COVID, and you had the lockdowns, and you had this intentional economic restructuring of the planet, all the climate agenda, the new green markets, emerging markets,
Climate church, yeah.
Yeah, and all of these factors, and they're all enormous, topics. I mean, Cory Morningstar, who is a friend, has written a lot about the NGO empire. All of this stuff is, it's kind of unprecedented, and none of the World Economic Forum plans, none of this reset, none of these 15-minute cities, none of this stuff has stuck. They tried 15-minute cities in the UK, and within 3 days, 90% of the CCTV cameras were destroyed, and every single I think it was 100% of the people given citations for leaving refused to pay them. So it was a massive failure. So what, a lot of this stuff.
People are embracing the bugs. People are looking forward to eating the bugs, John. That's the
bugs.
one thing
Eat the
that they're
bugs.
selling people on.
But
Yeah.
No, that's not true.
Even the Just Stop Oil, the orange men, they're just being tossed aside on the streets. We need to get to our jobs because we need to pay to fucking eat. Get off the fucking street is how that's going. But Carlo had a thought.
I just wanted to say, what will it really matter who's elected president of the U.S.? People portray Trump as some sort of a radical departure. Well, he is from.
No, that's not what you're supposed to say. He's a fascist. Basically,
literally worse than Hitler.
But the fact of the matter is, he gave the wealthy one of the greatest tax breaks in the history of
true. And he killed Qasem Soleimani.
Not since Augustan Rome, not since Licinius has anybody got a break like that. And plus, he was the first one to send a significant number of arms to Ukraine.
No, that was Obama.
Obama administration. We can't look at the presidency as being a person. It's behind the presidency is very correctly, as my friend Doug Valentine, Peter Dale Scott has coined, a deep state, and that deep state is linked to corporate power, and that's what controls policy in the U.S.
Carlo,
if they suspended the elections, it wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah,
Carlo,
exactly.
You would know
exactly
this
right.
This quote. I'm finding it hard to get the origin, but they have a million ways to Sunday to get back at you. Remember that one? That's the so-called deep state.
Right.
He calls it the permanent state.
Yeah, like blowing your head off like a barn door in a tornado, like they did to Kennedy.
I don't know if you know, or Ian probably does, but you know the Russian-American Andrei Martyanov. He's a military analyst, and he said the moment Trump got John Bolton in there, that's when he knew, okay, it's done. There is no Trump presidency now because that's just the war hawks, the neocons, and that was it.
And even Trump knew that Bolton was just a warmonger. He said, "This guy wakes up every morning, comes into my office, and wants to bomb somebody."
Yeah,
that's a quote, right?
And so when Trump can figure it out, you're pretty far gone. I've seen Bolton do analysis on the current situation in Palestine and Israel. He's a madman.
He absolutely is a dangerous one. Him and Lindsey Graham.
Well, he's talking about problems that he caused. He's talking about, I have the solution to the problem I caused on Tuesday. I have the solution on Thursday. What kind of lunacy is that?
Well, I think the other thing that's worth mentioning, given the ground that we're covering here, and it's related to AI and algorithms and all that as well. And that is the way Western media, legacy media, electronic media, whatever you want to call it, shapes the narrative out there for everything. And it was in the service. I mean, you saw it during the COVID lockdowns where you had leaders saying the exact same thing. Matt Taibbi had a funny remark the other day. He goes, I want to see the memo that goes out to these people because they are saying the exact same thing.
By the way, not to interrupt you, but that's where Matt Taibbi became far right. He got that label when he went.
Yeah, well, this is what I was just going to touch on. Is one of the tropes that the media sort of saturated social media with and electronic media and places like CNN and MSNBC and all the rest of it, including New York Times and LA Times, Washington Post. One of the tropes was that the fear that we see coming. This was their controlled opposition. Is that Klaus Schwab is bringing us world communism? And you saw this. Yeah, no, I know. Look, and you saw this very intentional conflation of communism and fascism. You saw it everywhere, and the key word is always totalitarianism, which, as Enzo Traverso noted, has come to mean enemy of the West. And so this was not an accident. You suddenly had people saying, I don't want to be eating bugs. I don't want world communism to take over my life. I don't want an electric car. This is world communism. And you just, at which point one sits back and goes, I don't know where to begin explaining to
very American, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the fears that people grew up with.
Primarily about the U.S. In fact.
Well, it's like Trump said. He's against Marxism and communism and fascism and all the other.
It's in 2022 when I learned that Biden and Kamala are Marxists. So that's fantastic education for me.
Well, Obama was a Marxist too.
Oh, he was too. Of course, Hussein.
Yeah. So it raises.
I wanted to go, Carlo.
I'm sorry. It just raises the fundamental question. In a sense, the American voters, or whatever you want to call American people, they matter and they don't matter.
Your word, ninnies.
They are ninnies. I live right. I live 20 minutes from the capital, and they're ninnies around here. Even here, it's just ninny land. But what can I tell you?
Yeah, I mean, but I think the other aspect of this is it's hard for me to believe that that electronic voting can in any way be legitimate anyway. I mean, it has to be child's play to fix elections, quite easily, it would seem to me. The authority apparatus gets the results they want. And electoral politics is
YouTube. We're not saying that's what happens. YouTube.
Exactly. YouTube.
Yeah, no. That's true. You at a certain point, the people get very excised and worked up about the election every 4 years, and yet, of course, nothing ever changes. Certainly, foreign policy in the United States hasn't changed in 80 years. And it's not run. The president is a figurehead, and he has some power. His administration has some power domestically, but foreign policy. Well, he has power. It's a limited power in foreign policy too, but it's on automatic pilot. I mean, this is. It has not changed literally in 80 years, and the Defense Department and the defense industry are part of this rotating door. They change positions every year and a half or so. The State Department is stocked with the same think tank people that are, some of them go back to the Reagan administration. I mean, we're seeing Elliot Abrams trotted out again. We're seeing these same people that train the death squads in Central America. They're still
Kissinger refuses to die.
just
Yes.
extraordinary, So electoral politics. I mean, I'm sorry I brought the subject up. Actually, now that I think about it, because it's just not significant, really. At the end of the
Jim
day.
Garrison interviewed some French newspaper interviewed Jim Garrison in 1969. Of course, Jim Garrison, he was an investigator in the JFK assassination, but he made the point that, the president is free to go into the Oval Office, make the drapes any color he wants, but he's not to encroach upon foreign policy. That's it's the military industrial complex. And they know that. They all know that. Trump maybe wasn't smart enough to realize that. He learned that, I think. But
what was the previous job of Lloyd Austin? Well,
he was,
Raytheon Northrop, one of these.
One of the board members.
Yeah, just before this show, one of the videos I saw on one of the social medias was this guy opening up champagnes and absolutely celebrating "We love America" because Raytheon stock just went up into the sky over the last week, obviously.
Yeah. And all of this talk about power adhering in the executive, well, it doesn't. It adheres into the deep state. It floods back into the deep state. That's the real beneficiary with the weakening of the legislature, which is already largely a farce anyway, because you could buy anybody there, if you got $5. But now it's just crass. It's just there's a
gridlock.
That's all I have to say.
That benefits the status quo.
Here's the thing. I'll tell you something about public opinion. Two things. One of them I think I sent to you just before the show on Financial Times. Maybe it came out 4 hours ago, 5 hours ago. No screen sharing. I don't have it. But it was about the EU facing an impossible situation vis-a-vis Israel. And what it says was there's probably going to be an ethnic cleansing. One EU official says they don't really mind that. But apparently we're going to lose a lot of influence in the third world or the global south, as they said. So there was a second article, I don't know, I think it was Bloomberg, that Chinese social media, the Bilibili's, Beidou's, those places were full of opinions siding with the Palestinians. So I think that the silver lining here is they have the mighty Wurlitzer, the power of the soft power of almost global propaganda. But I think Carlo always raises that poll that they have lower trust ratings than even fucking Congress because no one really trusts them. There are moments like this in history when it's emotional heartstrings. If you're looking at AI generated images of child babies or something, and it's meant the reason why you are seeing revelers of a rave is because it's festival season, the end of festival season in Europe, in America. So people can relate, those poor little girls, they just went out. Other than this, it really has lost a lot of its power. So I think that there's a big silver lining there, even though they pretend, because they went into the brick wall of reality in Ukraine. That's why no one's talking about it. And Zelensky is trying to get to Tel Aviv, to get permission to fly to Tel Aviv, to show solidarity or something like that, because the spotlights are no longer there. That's dead.
You have to go back to Colin Powell's kid, Michael Powell, was the chairman, head of the FCC. And I think the first vote was in 1999 and then in 2003. And it was the media consolidation. And you went from something like 300 independent news organizations.
To like 6 conglomerates, 8,
something like to 6.
Yeah.
We've
all seen these compilations.
And it had a profound effect on the way propaganda was disseminated. Everybody stayed on message. Those 6 conglomerates are not competitors. They cooperate with each other. And so all of the various agendas that, whether it's the climate, everything has to be green now, put green in front of any term and it becomes marketable. Ever since that consolidation, the uniformity of opinion has been really acute. And this is a massive obstacle for educating people, for getting the public to understand that what they see on, in Norway, it's NRK, which is the Norwegian BBC, and that these organizations are part of this big conglomerate, and they all work together, and it's not an independent media. There's also
at least they're free, John. At least they're free, not like in Russia and China.
Yeah, that's right. But
And
the consolidation also served to completely eliminate alternative media. I mean, I think sometimes about the Democratic Convention in 1968, was it? Mm-hmm. Esquire magazine, I can't think of his name, had this wonderful editor, and he hired Jean Genet, William Burroughs, and some other guy, and I think Allen Ginsberg too, to cover the convention. I mean, who does that today? There's nothing resembling an alternative media. The anti-war movement in Vietnam, you had great people writing for small presses. That's all gone. So, apropos of the comment about the Global South is the least indoctrinated part of the planet. And the people in the Global South were the ones that were most skeptical of COVID. They're most skeptical of the climate agenda. There was a piece today, Thomas Fawzi wrote about net zero in Africa, that it's being rejected because it would squash African development. Of course, you have the situation with Niger and Burkina Faso, the resistance to colonial theft, finally. And the EU doesn't know what to do about this stuff, because what are they going to do? Niger said, we're not giving you uranium anymore to France. And Macron stamped his feet and said, we're I'm going to bring my soldiers home then. Great, good. And that's all he can do. So these are the least indoctrinated people in the world right now. And the great unwashed. And they are, when we have these conversations, I have to remind myself often that what we're talking about, mostly when we're talking about the shaping of opinion and all of these are first world issues. It is that demographic. Chomsky identified it from 60 years ago. It's that educated white 30%, and they are the most visible in media, and they are the decision makers. They want to keep being the decision makers. But there are millions and millions of people, and we see it in protests increasingly around the world, who don't buy the story anymore, much less than the white educated 30% in the US. These are the people that said, fuck you, I'm not going to wear a mask. They said, I'm not going to eat bugs either. And we're going to burn coal because people's lives depend upon it, and their livelihoods depend upon it. So that's that. I just wanted to add that commentary.
Yeah, I agree with much of what you're saying. However, don't underestimate the West. I mean, you want to talk about Burkina Faso. There's been 2 attempts on Traore's life,
right,
in the last couple of weeks. Basically, the French offered one of the ministers $40 million to knock off Traore. The amount of Islamic fundamentalist terrorism unleashed upon Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Gee, what a kind of coincidence!
Yeah.
Has increased 100-fold. And not only it increased when the West went in to defend those countries against the countries in the Sahel against these terrorists, or so-called fundamentalist terrorists. But now it's gotten even worse. So they're working overtime. The CIA.
Yeah, no, there's no question.
They are, but on that point, I wish I had it as a slide. Have any of you guys seen the latest The Economist, the London newspaper's cover? It's a big Africa in barbed wire, and it says Africa loses faith in democracy. You see, that's the problem. They've lost faith in democracy.
Yeah. But bunch of savages anyway.
It was lamenting. There's a lot of lamenting going on.
But let's look at the context of that so-called democracy.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And now you have Ruto sending Kenyan policemen to Haiti on behest of the UN.
The
So,
UN approved an invasion. What?
You know, a week and a half ago, I'm on this show going, "Oh, I love Ruto," and I'm going, "Well, you're taken again, fat man. You got to be more skeptical. You're an old man. You should know this shit."
Yeah.
You know, it's
Well, I mean, you know, so much of this, both the propaganda and the policy, was shaped with the breakup of Yugoslavia. I always encourage people to read Ed Herman's 4-part piece in Monthly Review on the breakup of Yugoslavia, Michael Perendi's book, To Kill a Nation. George Samueli has a book. There's a lot of very good. Diana Johnstone had one of the first books, Fool's Crusade, I think it was called, because you see what was done at that time, illegally kidnapping Milosevic, creating ad hoc this international tribunal that had no legitimacy at all, but, you know, it was like a kangaroo court, a star chamber, and even then, the Milosevic trial was a fiasco, so they just took it off the front page. One day, Christine Amanpour, who's married to Jamie Rubin, was saying trial of the century. It's the trial of the century, and interviewing. And literally the next day, it was invisible. It was gone because Milosevic defended himself, and he was a former lawyer, and destroyed the prosecution. It was just gone. But you saw all the same stuff. Rape camps and the guy behind the barbed wire fence, they're concentrated, none of which, you know, of course, turned out to be remotely true. The trial went on and on. 10 years after his death, Milosevic is acquitted. Nobody cares anymore, and it's on to the next. But all the propaganda techniques, the entire idea, creating Kosovo as a little client state in the middle of the Balkans, all of this stuff you see replicated today in other contexts. That was the trial balloon. That was the canary in the mine shaft. And it worked very well for the US in terms of the former Yugoslavia. And so they keep repeating the same stuff, the same agenda, the same ad campaigns, apparently the same propaganda, if we judge from the last couple of days. So that's a period that's worth studying, in my opinion.
Yes, as ICC lawyer Christopher Black has expressed.
I know Christopher Black's a very good friend of mine, by the way.
Oh, he's a great. He's
been on the show. He's come on
4 or 5 times. As he expressed, you know, Milosevic, he along with Milosevic, proved Milosevic's innocence. So what did the West have to do? To refer to their old assassination programs.
Yeah,
so their old school of assassination. So yeah,
there's an article at Dissonant Voice. You can look it up by me, but it's lengthy quotes. Chris Black was really the co-author of it, about the fallout from the Milosevic. I hate to plug myself, but yeah, Chris is,
no, please do. We always forget to do that.
Tiffany Dixon too was part of the team that defended Milosevic. And the interesting thing about that, I was on the artists' call that Tiffany created, artists in support of Milosevic, and I signed up proudly. 2 Nobel Prize winners on that artist call, Peter Handke and Harold Pinter. So, you know,
I was going to say, there's a reason that we've seen from NATO sources, not just the one guy, he's called Guy Verhofstadt or something like that. Yeah. He used the term balkanization. He drew up Russia with the little regions with their own little flags, and he did the same for China, and now he's done it with India. Sometimes he's angry at India. I don't know why.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. And just as a joke, as a flip side, Christiane Amanpour, that beautiful foreign correspondent, is the one interviewing Hillary Clinton about what to do with all those Trump voters. And now the answer is, well, we're going to deprogram them.
Deprogram them.
Yes.
Yeah, you seen that?
She's a terrible politician, Hillary Clinton. I mean, she just is a terrible politician. She looks mad as a waltzing mice right now. I mean, she's also unelectable at this point.
Jesus, I hope so. I mean, Blinken would not surprise me, but Blinken and Michelle.
You know why I think Blinken's a good call?
Why?
Because he had a photo op the other day where he was playing his Fender Stratocaster.
I saw it. He's not bad, actually.
Yes.
And he's not bad. Yeah, the world was
let's
burning.
not get him under.
Bill Clinton saxophone, Tony Blinken Stratocaster. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I learned
Did you
this
hear?
morning.
Did you hear? Blinken says the Hamas attack was like 10 9/11s.
Yes, I do. I did see that. First, he approached, and then he said, my granddad he connected Russia with Hamas immediately. My granddad fled Kiev, the famous city of Kiev, from the Russian pogroms, and my stepdad, who escaped, well, apparently, according to Wikipedia, 6, but maybe 3 death camps now. There's only one way you escape 3 death camps. But anyway, and he connected it to and then he said, if you look at the population and the density, yes, you suffered 10 9/11s. That is the official line.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I did not know that he was Ukrainian, or that his grandfather was in a pogrom of by the Russians, a Russian Tsarist pogrom.
Oh yeah.
That's interesting. And then so he would be the third, assuming everybody stays the same. It's still going to be Biden, Kamala, and then he would be third in line, right? Is what the
Isn't
point
the
is?
speaker third? I
Yeah.
think
Speaker
at
of the
one
House.
time I remember Nancy Pelosi being third.
Well, that's
to
why
the
I'm
throne.
asking. Is
There's-
he
there's-
fourth?
I don't know. It
No,
might
speaker-
be the speaker, actually.
It is
But are
Speaker
we
of the
thinking
House.
he's going to run independent for the presidency, or he's going to get it because they're going to go through a chain of people?
Well,
Because
I think there's a very good chance Biden doesn't last through the campaign
Sure.
season. He certainly can't debate. I mean, right? So, but of course, if he runs against Trump, you'll have 2 candidates who refuse to debate, who might be under indictment, both of them. I mean, it's really kind of funny in a sense. But I think that Biden can't survive the campaign. At some point, he'll have to withdraw because of ill health. They're going to have to disappear Kamala somehow because she's a train wreck, and that's when Blinken might get tapped. Bring his
Okay.
Stratocaster, and
So he'd be on the ballot for people
he's
to vote for.
youthful, relatively youthful.
Plays
he
the
has
guitar.
that kind of hair that falls in his face.
I keep forgetting that the U.S. campaign is a year-long event, because we're talking a year from now, to 2024, and a lot of things. I'm wondering if, like Victoria Nuland, will Blinken still have any credibility a year from now?
Well,
But,
this is why I think Michelle Obama. I'm telling you, she's the only politician, only person in the political class. She's not strictly speaking a politician. The only member of the political class that has a favorability rating. People love Michelle, and that's why I think it made some kind of sense.
She's very likable, and she said all this for a fucking flag. That was a nice thing for her today.
Yeah, I mean,
But I
she's
hope
appeared
not.
on stage with Springsteen. She has all the bona fides, right?
I hope
So-
she's smart enough not to do that to herself. But
Yeah,
they could talk her into it. They could somehow.
Well, right now I think one of the concerns about the Congress right now is there's no there in the House there's no head, there's no leadership, and the head of the third person in line for the presidency is the head of the House of the House, not the
Speaker,
Senate,
right,
the
yeah.
House.
Yeah, the speaker, yeah.
Speaker of the House. I'm sorry.
So that's the third. Yeah, there's a it goes down dozens of people. They have a pecking order.
yeah.
I was just going to reiterate, because this brings to mind, what was it, a couple of months ago, Vilnius, right? The big NATO summit where Zelensky was there like the gardener, like alone, separated.
Right. Yeah, there was a lot of funny memes with that.
Yeah. That wasn't supposed to be that way. Ukraine was supposed to be one. The counteroffensive was going to go all the way down to Crimea and all that. And they're going to have a celebration and force Russia to the table, and it would be in tatters and destroyed. And that would have, Joe Biden would have been the winning wartime president. I really think that was the plan. And then
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
the brick wall of reality, both economically. I mean, right now, Russia has outperformed the US and the EU together. That's the new IMF stats. The thing is, why they're salty is it wasn't supposed to be this way. So whatever comes next is going to be emergency crisis management. And I can
What
scenarios.
do you think the failure in Ukraine has done to the West's grand plan for Taiwan and China? I mean, can we say that it might have derailed it? I mean, we can hope so.
Yeah, it's
I'm
hard.
not-
I don't know, but I do think that that those people, Robert Kagan and Victoria Nuland, the people that wrote that Rand Corporation paper,
2019 extending Russia.
Yeah, overextending Russia. I think they really believed it would be successful. I'm sure they genuinely thought that Russia would fall apart and they would go in and balkanize it and create a bunch of statelets and steal the resources. That was their wet dream, and they don't know what to do with the situation now, which is why they will target Iran or Taiwan, but they can't do anything. I mean, they will rattle their sabers, but I don't know that they can do much beyond that.
Yeah, Lloyd Austin is adamant, like, we are the superpower. We can supply both Ukraine and Israel at the same time. And that's not even accounting for Taiwan. So I'm just going to answer with a little meme I found. If you want to put it on screen, Billy Bob, that's Russians made it, obviously.
Yes, I've seen that one. Yes, it's good. It's
That's very funny. Yeah, well, Zelensky has many mansions he can retire to. And I predicted over a year ago, I'll stand by this prediction too, Zelensky will end up hosting a talk show, a late night talk show. It might take 5 years, but you watch.
I'm watching that every day.
He was trained as that, right? He was a comedian. And it's worth watching.
He was a fabulous pianist.
Yes.
yes.
You got me there.
Oh, I think
we all know what Billy Bob is referring to. Yeah.
Playing a piano with an organ. That's
No, Scott Ritter's piece, Citizen Zelensky, was very funny, actually, because there were a lot of those clips of his old comedy routines, and that was his gig. So you watch tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you. If he makes it out, I mean, he's allergic to being in Kiev, basically. He's flying everywhere else. He went to Romania, he couldn't get a speech in parliament. Then he went to Brussels and he was like supervised by Jan Stoltenberg next to him. So he would say the right things, and then he was taken away from the cameras. And now he wants to go to Tel Aviv, basically anywhere, just not Kiev.
But not Kiev, that's true.
What is, who's the national security guy? That guy, he said that Ukraine is at the end of the rope of US funding.
Oh yeah,
that was amazing.
Yeah.
What's his name? Come on,
Kirby.
Kirby.
Yes,
Kirby.
Kirby, yes.
Yeah, because that's where Ukraine is, the end of the rope. You know, from as long as it takes, we're with you to the end. We've gotten to the end of the rope this week.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider about China is that ironically the Kuomintang are in the lead in Taiwan.
No, that's great.
And
that is great.
And they, as history turns itself on its head, are supportive of Beijing. So that's a factor. Just to mention.
They are joining forces with the third opposition party, which I forgot, against the DPP, against this Western puppetry.
That's right.
So those are opposites too, but they said enough of this.
Yeah. So we probably should go back to Israel and Palestine, right?
We can, but can I add one more thing that happened?
Sure.
And it should send shockwaves around the world, but all I saw was one bitching article. I don't know where, maybe Politico, it sounds like them, because China got onto the UNHRC, the Human Rights Council, by something like 140 votes, like unanimously. And the article was like, oh, this is a very low score, like China really didn't do well to get on it. And I think that changes a lot, including the Middle East, for China to have a big say finally.
Yeah. It's an interesting point.
154 votes to be precise.
Yeah. I hope they're empowered. I hope that system allows them to wield influence. I'm apprehensive to believe that, that system can really, empower nations like that to make a difference. But I hope so. I'm certainly no expert. What did you want to discuss specifically, Carlo, about Israel-Palestine?
Oh no, I was just going to open it up to everybody else.
Well, I wanted to know what everybody thinks about the situation with, there's one border crossing, some sort of gate from Gaza to Egypt. And obviously the whole thing was 1 million people in 24 hours need to leave northern Gaza and go to the southern Gaza. Previously, he said the Jews should leave the Sinai Peninsula, which is that part of Egypt. I don't know why. But getting rid of the people out there. And Egypt said, no, we're not taking responsibility for 1.2 million, about half of Gaza's people. And I think they shouldn't, but I really want to hear everybody's views before mine. Maybe that's being careful, but I mean, that's what ethnic cleansing is. Get rid of them and then the land is ours, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think Israel is running on a very tight clock, a very tight time frame here, because when this first kicked off, I said, if it goes any longer than a month, Israel's going to have problems, and they've squandered a week of it. Because there's not a single Israeli soldier set foot in Gaza, as far as I know so far.
There's a threat of a ground offensive, but it's just not happening.
Yeah, so I think, and they talk and I said this was my first a blog post I wrote about this thing, several days ago. It was just they've talked such a big game. We are going to destroy Hamas. We're going to destroy the human animals. I mean, they talk. You can't. There's that old marketing saying. Under promise and over deliver.
Right.
They did the opposite. They're over promising and are inevitably going to under deliver, because they just set themselves up for that. I mean, because I don't see any way they're reasonably going to be able to destroy Hamas. They do not have even the stockpiles, munitions they would need.
One U.S. airplane has landed, and I think Netanyahu just announced the second one is coming. Two U.S. airplane worth.
They would need probably 10, 20 times the stockpiles they actually have.
A lot depends. Much depends on what Hezbollah decides to do, if they're going to actively become involved in this. And that's like a 50-50 proposition right now. But if they do, then Israel's in trouble.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. They have nothing compared to Iran, but they have a way bigger arsenal of missile.
Huge arsenal and highly trained soldiers. That's a trained army. And
what do you make of this? I don't know if it was substantiated that the foreign minister of Iran was on his way to Damascus, the international airport in Syria. And that, as well as I think Aleppo International Airport, was
bombed
by Syria. That is, and everybody was saying that's a serious escalation and shouldn't. Putin warned about this. Other people, so far I haven't seen anything from Syria. But your guys' thoughts? I know they did this for 10 years. Literally, they bomb airports.
I get the feeling that nobody really wants to escalate, but like Ian said, that's kind of a problem because of the talking that Israel has done. They can definitely stand off and bomb Gaza, and they have, right? More bombs in the last week than all of Afghanistan for a year is what Ben said earlier. So they've been bombing the hell out of Gaza. But, there's tunnels, there's bunkers. They're certainly not going to destroy Hamas that way through aerial bombing.
No, they're going to kill a lot of innocents, though, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Well, what is it? 50% of Gaza is children. The population is children.
18 and below is 60%, I think.
60%.
Yeah. Extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
They can kill a lot of kids, but that's about all they can do.
And by the way, this media shit has worked domestically to an extent, because I've seen a horrible video. I'll just describe it. People chanting and cheering in Israel, and they're saying Nakba 2.0 and Gaza is a cemetery, and singing along. So it worked. Yeah. Don't forget the domestic market for this kind of propaganda too. And that's the reason some neighbors like Egypt couldn't do this, but Jordan was another. It was the first to open the air bases, to the U.S. Air Force. I think the A-10 planes. No, they're going to, I think, Qatar. Anyway, and then the king of Jordan said, no, we come out strongly on the side of Palestine, because all the streets were full of protesters. There's public opinion to take into account as well.
No, it's interesting, the support for Palestinians, because they said that it was outlawed to have protests in favor of Palestine in France. And there were massive protests anyway. And this was somewhere else, and I forget where. There's been more support for the Palestinian cause than I've seen in a long time. But it had been my theory that Israel had lost control of the narrative anyway a few years ago. and as Ian pointed out at the beginning, this incursion shattered forever this mythology of Israeli invincibility and technical know-how and military supremacy and expertise. And look, they have one of their big industries is exporting military training, security training, and counterinsurgency training for U.S. police departments. But they do that all over the world. That industry is going to take a hit, right?
LAPD, I think, gets trained from.
Yeah.
I mean, the same happened to NATO and the Bradleys and the armored vehicles, the vaunted Leopard tanks in Ukraine. They were supposed to be the invincible Western high-tech tech. I'm just wondering, on the topic of public opinion, the Cradle is one of the best outlets I've ever seen. Do you guys want to see like a compilation of short 1-2 second videos of just the region I've seen today?
Yes, sir.
Put it on. This is Damascus, Syria, so you can see the moving video as well. That's Yemen. Yemen was in a deadly war with Saudi Arabia just recently, the Houthis. That's Jordan. The king of Jordan can not really go against that many people. Baghdad, look at that. That's Iraq. Holy shit. Iran, obviously. By the way, that's a little Netanyahu figure right there. You can see him. Turkey. Oh, by the way, I didn't suspect Erdogan was a fence sitter for the longest time. Everybody knows this, but he took the absolute anti-Western line on this for once in his life. That's probably because of that. There's Lebanon, and finally Qatar. Even the so-called rich Gulf countries, the people are well informed.
Well, I think when people smell blood, when they sniff out weakness, it creates a kind of momentum.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing. This goes back to Ian's original point, that the shattering of that myth has long-term repercussions. This is just the beginning, I have a sense.
I want to draw a corollary to what Russia did in Ukraine. I think the SMO also kind of liberated this resistance, and you see it in Africa. We're watching it in the Middle East.
Absolutely connected. You're right.
There's one other place that escapes my mind that.
Do you know when I made this point of people sensing blood in the water? Because it's not exclusively a Middle Eastern thing. It's also in Europe. It was when Poland demanded something like 1.3 trillion from Germany.
Yes, reparations. Yes.
I thought, okay, they see something's on.
Yeah.
Let's get that money out now while we can.
I always want to, for our viewers that, aren't as opinionated and aren't as aware, I always like to, I was wanting to talk about Zionism and try and just demonstrate the hypocrisy for how Zionism is so embraced by the West, and yet the West pretends to be anti-racist, liberal, tolerant, and that's the opposite. Like Zionism and the state of Israel is the opposite of everything the West pretends to stand for. And we threw South Africa under the bus. Israel stuck with South Africa during apartheid, but we threw them under the bus, and they didn't last. Like once they lost the support of Western imperialism, South Africa, collapsed. They had to step down. So the same thing is going to happen in Israel. Once they no longer have the U.S. support, like they're unsustainable. And how long, with the decline of Western hegemony, how much longer can the U.S. support Israel? So I see that it's unsustainable. Who knows how long? Hopefully sooner rather than later. But can anybody speak to that disconnect between our values of liberal democracy, and yet we embrace Zionism?
Well, when I was a kid, because I'm 72 now, I'm an old guy, and when I was a kid, up until in the 60s, the kind of counterculture took hold in the 60s. We were taught this myth about the founding of Israel, and we had pictures of the kibbutz with everybody gardening, and it was all very cooperative and vaguely socialist, and it was such a plucky little,
the kibbutz myth.
Yeah, and nobody ever mentioned that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were violently displaced. Was simply never mentioned. I didn't know about it till I was 20, 25. And I started reading about it. And then you saw more stories coming out about the bombing of the King David Hotel and the Haganah and all of this. And that was the beginning of Israel had to start working much harder with their propaganda, Hasbara, right? The explanation. Yeah. But it still had a firm hold in the Western imagination. That is decreasing now. I mean, and the best voice for explaining that journey is Miko Peled, who is the author of A General's Son. His father was a high-ranking IDF general, and he was of kind of from a very famous, almost by Israeli standards, aristocratic family in Israel. And of course, his journey was, he's really remarkable, in fact, because he talks about the stages at which he learned the way homes were stolen from Palestinian families that his mother knew when she was young, and the shame she felt about it, and his father's career and his ambivalence about that, and on and on and on. And he has a number of speeches that you can listen to on YouTube where he talks about 1947, 1948, and what happened, and that this was a violent, racist, settler colonial dispossession of an entire people. And there was nothing supportable about it. And he says now there's nothing supportable about Zionism. It has to go, in fact.
At one point, the UN condemned it as a racist ideology.
Albert Einstein wrote a letter to Franklin Roosevelt saying, beware of Zionism.
And there are still a lot of very good people, outspoken Jewish people, absolutely against the Zionist project.
Yeah,
some of the most wonderful voices in the world.
There are really good voices. I'm just going to listen because you mentioned Norman Finkelstein, who is fantastic. Jonathan Cook is fantastic. Eve Bartlett is fantastic.
Oh yes, Eva Bartlett.
Because she has been there a lot. Miko Peled is fantastic. These are people, and even what's his name, Max Blumenthal's book Goliath is very good. Ilan Pape. There are a number of people who have written about this, and
even Chomsky,
easy to find,
Yeah. Well, it's at the risk of sounding like the Rain Man, on the flip side of what Billy Bob proposed is that the what's coming out of the U.S. propaganda machine is purely rhetorical in the worst sense of the word rhetoric. That liberal democracy is not practiced by the U.S. It's obvious that it's really just a ruse. It's just a smokescreen for out and out empire. So it's just a tool that they use.
Do you want to see? I'm not going to show it, but I'm going to encapsulate it in a single picture that I'll just describe to you. Try to imagine. This is a statue of Stepan Bandera in Lviv, Lvov, however you call it, which apparently, I can't tell, Ian, if that was a fake or not, but it was lit up in blue and white and the Star of David. And
I've seen that. Yes, you should show it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great.
I'll try to find it, but meanwhile,
that definitely demonstrates the hypocrisy. So the thing is, Zionism started in like 1896, 1895, the first Zionist Congress, and at that point, Palestine was 95% non-Jewish. There's no way you're going to create a Jewish homeland in a country that's 95% non-Jewish without terrorism, ethnic cleansing, and land theft. That's what Zionism is, period. And they maintain it through those same actions. So, it's just like if people knew that, I don't think Israel would have that support. But it's the propaganda apparatus that we've talked about all show long that, is insidious. And people are dumb. Sorry, people, but a lot of you people are dumb.
No, people are not dumb, but don't allow your emotional strings to be. Don't allow people to control you with that.
Well,
naive.
We do this podcast. I'm going to plug myself here.
Yeah, please.
Aesthetic Resistance on SoundCloud. Corey Morningstar is on it, and Johan Edebo, Hiroyuki Himada, and Varun Mathur in India. And we talk about all of this a lot. But one of the things because it's been going on for about a year and a half now, 2 years maybe, and one of the topics that keeps coming up and that we feel strongly about is that to counter this propaganda that's so pervasive and ubiquitous now, it's like you need a people's university. You need people deprogramming them, actually. Hillary Clinton. Now is my imitation of Hillary Clinton. But you have to counter the propaganda by helping people know that there are alternative texts and alternative readings of these things, that the predominant thrust of Western propaganda since World War II has been anti-communism. That everything Western scholars, Western academia is entrenched in a rabid anti-communist agenda. It still exists. It started with the Dulles brothers, and it has continued unabated. And so I think that's why I mention authors, and Western culture is destroyed. Art and culture is destroyed, and it has to be rebuilt, I think, brick by brick. This is the end of my polemic speech here. And that begins by somehow helping people to educate themselves and to stop reading the mainstream press, stop believing it anyway, to encourage skepticism and critical thinking, all things that have seemingly disappeared over the last 30 years. And I think that's what shows like this do, podcasts like this do. I'd like to think it's what our podcast does, my blog does, because otherwise we live in an Orwellian dystopia and there's no way out. So that's the end of it.
I'm voting for John Steppling 2024.
It also brings us back to the situation in Israel-Palestine, because of some health issues I'm having. I've been actually watching a lot of CNN, and I've noticed that their coverage, they're trying to parse Hamas is here, and the innocent Palestinians are here, and Hamas is using them as human shields, and they don't deserve to die in this miserable way, and there's a kind of they're trying to create that kind of empathy or more likely sympathy with the Palestinian people as opposed to Hamas, which is a radical group, and that seems to me to be a bit of a sea change in the way. I don't really recall the plight of Palestinians being expressed in that way.
It's less pro-Israel, more Palestinian. There's a little bit of a change.
So here's a successful act of violence that has moved the mainstream media to reconsider its position upon Palestine in general, and there's a certain irony to that, and I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that or not, but that's just something I've noticed.
You're right. It moved the needle, even if a tiny bit. It had to move the needle. And I hope there's more of that to come, because as these stories get debunked,
I kind of saw a little bit less of the in-your-face pro-Israel and a little bit giving voice to the Palestinians once, honestly, with Trump. Like when Trump was all in with Israel and Netanyahu, I think that kind of upset a lot of the establishment about Netanyahu. And so, they're still going to be pro-Israel, but they've allowed of opening up of pro-Palestinian voices. That's what I've seen. John Steppling, we are in desperate need of gender diversity here. If you want to put in the good word for us with Corey, we would love to have her as a guest. She's awesome.
I will ask her. But people should read Corey's blog, The Wrong Kind of Green, which is remarkable. And there's 10 years worth of writing on that blog, especially about NGOs, the climate agenda, the COVID story. She's a great, brilliant researcher. So I encourage people to read that. Yeah, I'll invite her. And
awesome.
this was fun to be on. I'm reaching the end of my voice is going.
Okay.
I can feel. So because I've had a few health issues too, actually. But it was a pleasure, and it was nice to meet everybody. And I think these things matter.
Absolutely.
I think it matters that we keep talking, and it's often not easy because you open yourself up to attacks, and that's just the way it is. So, but I think it's important what we're doing. So that's
Thank
all.
you very much, John.
We hope to have you
end
back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll end the stream here, if that's all right, Ben.
yeah, I'm out.
Yeah,
of here.
I had some
Goodbye,
thoughts,
guys.
but
Thank you.
thank you for being on the show. I hope to have you back. Okay.
I was gonna thank everybody, but
You're still live.
we are still live. We did not end the
all
stream.
right. All right.
Yeah, no, because you might have had some comments, Ian. So I was gonna just close it for John, but since he left, did you have any final things? There's a few comments from the viewers, which
we should answer those as well.
Yes, should answer the viewer comments.
Yeah.
Yes.
The West assumed that China will never have the capacity to do high-tech manufacturing powerhouse while exploiting their labor force. That was what the West was thinking when they invested trillions into the Chinese economy, and it backfired. So thank God it did, and the West was wrong, and they're not happy about it.
They read neoliberal economics like a Bible, and therefore what's good for the company line has to be good in the future, and that's how they fail to account for the future, where China has just become the manufacturing powerhouse, larger when it comes to industrial manufacturing than the US and the EU combined. That's what those guys did.
Thank God for China, as I've heard Scott Ritter say. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
What else? That's about it for the comments.
Well, that one, they signed an agreement. Walmart became one of the products of that agreement, basically saying, well, we can get you cheap labor, get stuff here, and basically you can have the technology. And now they're whining about it, that China has technology transfer, and they can do the phones, the gadgets, the cars. China is the top carport exporter in the world, and mostly to Russia, by the way.
They're very high tech. Pretty soon they're going to be doing the best chips. The R&D they're pouring into technology is like 4-to-1 with the entire West.
Friend of the show, SL Canton 2030 on Twitter, he popped into my mind a couple of times here. One is when he refers to the Western media, he increasingly calls it the Mockingbird media, something worth Googling, Project Mockingbird or Operation Mockingbird. And the second was, for instance, Hungary or in the West, you go to McDonald's for Wi-Fi and they have fucking 5G rural forests. He photographed his phone in a rural forest in China with
5G in the forest.
Yeah.
You get it in the roads here. If you have to go off the road for a few feet, you lose it. But no, that's pretty amazing.
Okay. Concluding thoughts, everybody?
Well, the Keji comment.
Oh, the Keji, sorry.
Keji, yeah, I agree entirely with that. I basically covered that ground myself here, or attempted to. I'm flabbergasted. On the one hand, the media has very low truth ratings when people are polled, but on the other hand, what they believe the media says. On the one hand, they say they don't believe the media, but on the other hand, when you talk with them, they spout the very thing that they say they don't believe, the very entity they don't believe. I mean, I don't know any other way of putting it. I just don't understand that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, so calling it brainwashing kind of gives them a pass because they have agency and they want to believe the bullshit. A lot of them, they're happy to have this narrative to go along with, and so it's not. Yeah, brainwashing isn't the best word. It's a license. It gives them license to go along with this kind of belief system and worldview, and there was a great article about that, so that's what I'm referencing. But yeah, brainwashing versus license to go along with the bullshit, the propaganda.
Yeah, they're always trying to chisel you around to one way of viewing a conflict, the world, whatever. But what they rely on mostly is for you to have no memory, a memory of a goldfish. Don't forget what was last week. Forget what was 2 years ago, 7 years ago. I think that's something worth fighting against. And I enjoyed the reference or metaphor to Pavlov's dog. Yeah. The bell rings, you're supposed to salivate and try to resist that. when you
Even
read the headline.
Slug's smarter than that.
Mhm.
Even
I mean,
Slug is smarter.
One thing I do is in primary school, I would have a PR class to teach people the art of how people try to control people. Immediately, if you look at an
Yeah,
article,
that's a good
who
point.
sponsored this? What is the aim of this article? What are they trying to convince me of? It's
Yeah.
a good way to approach it.
A rational, real education system would do exactly that.
My concluding thought, if we are getting there, right, we're done with the review questions.
Mhm.
Cool. It really is in 2001, the original 9/11, the war on terror. America could go on to 5-7 countries, bomb them to smithereens. Okay, China was nothing compared to what it is today, economically, industrially, militarily, especially. Russia was just healing from a massive trauma in the early 2000s. It was still a wreck, ruled mostly by the oligarchs, and Putin was at the beginning of putting his house back into order. This
Yeah.
is not 2001, people. 2023. Iran is not what it was, and Israel, especially the US, are not what they were. I think that the increasing not scarecrowing, but lamentive articles I see from the West very, very much attest to this. So I think there's a whole lot of hope to be had, but there's one caveat, as usually there is. The difference between Ukraine and Israel is if Israel feels threatened, you guys can Google it. They have what's called the Shamshon or Samson option. I don't know what.
The Samson option.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
it's an open secret. They never really
Samson.
made it a secret that they have a working nuclear program, and some nights that worries the shit out of me. Would be.
Is it even feasible to nuke Iran that's right next to him? Isn't all that nuclear fallout just gonna?
Well, it's a suicide option. That's what the Samson option is.
No, it
Because, like Samson brought the temple down on himself, that's why they call it
Oh.
the Samson option. It's the same doctrine. Just nuke the Middle East. And people, because Seymour Hersh, I did not know he wrote a book about this, but Seymour Hersh, the journalist, apparently wrote an expose book about the Israeli nuclear program. I just found out about it yesterday, so I've not read it. So I'd actually, because I know there's a lot of speculation on the extent of their nuclear doctrine. Are they just going to, like, if they lost a war and were overrun, would they just nuke the country that invaded them, or would they just nuke everybody?
I don't know.
Because Samson brought the temple down and killed everybody. So just hearing it called the Samson option make me think it's the latter. That they might just take out the world with them. That they might just place a few, So it's
We
worrying.
definitely want that threat out there. We can hope
Yes.
that they wouldn't.
Well, and the problem is that this is a very much a tail wagging the dog situation, because the USA, everybody, I see people, especially in the past week, say this over and over again. Oh, Israel is a puppet. The USA is controls. Like, guys, that's not true at all. The Israeli lobby is the biggest lobby in the USA. That's a fact.
Even someone unearthed an early Bibi Netanyahu speech where he said, well, if the US says one thing, that doesn't matter. We have such overwhelming support among the population. He was referring to that we're going to get it anyway. I mean, very openly speaking about what you're describing.
So the Pentagon might be really scared about about Israel dragging us into a major regional war that would inherently probably turn it into a world war, just because that's the hub of the world's energy, and just the conflicting alliances in the region.
No, that could be
like
the assassination of the Archduke, same kind of thing.
Ferdinand, yes.
Yeah.
Guys, I have to wrap it up.
Yes.
Okay, I think
there's so much more to discuss that, but we'll have more options next week. So thank you, everyone. We will see you. We're going to be doing Tuesdays and Fridays now. So no more Thursdays. There's not enough time between Tuesday and Thursday. So Tuesdays and Fridays is better. We'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you very much.